shaky, slow twirl instead. As he passed, she couldn't escape his icy aura. She wondered if he even felt the cold anymore, or anything else for that matter. He passed without a glance, his attention focused on the door, which was already opening as he neared. She tried to think of something to say, some sort of protest, but nothing came. Instead, her lips were frozen half open, and her tongue clung to the roof of her mouth. And so she watched him depart with the door closing silently behind him. She was certain she heard it lock, no doubt with a spell as well. At least the light in the room remained. Her shoulders sunk with a heavy sigh. Madness. "Wait," she repeated, as she took in the various tomes and scrolls resting in the bookcase across from her. The tug to brave a look in a book or two was appealing, but there was something much more vital vying for her attention. A moment later she was marching for the door, eyes half squinting in intense study. On the other side of the door, Cadrith was making his way down the hallway, letting the magical light that followed him through the tower serve as guide. He didn't need it, of course. He'd been down these halls enough times to find the room he was seeking with his eyes closed, though it might have been close to 8 centuries since he last set foot in the tower. He'd only seen 5 of those years, thanks to his magic-induced sleep. But even those years had inched forward at a snail's pace. All told, the additional amount of time worked in his favor, he supposed, at least when it came to the populace. But it wasn't them he had to contend with. Another thunderous shaking reminded him of his last encounter with Endarian. The god had tried the same tactic before and failed. He'd thought Endarian would be smart enough to try something new. Maybe he thought the tower and the spells around it had weakened over time. It didn't matter. Cadrith didn't plan on staying here long. As he walked, he went over recent events. Everything was going as he'd planned. Sargus, his one-time demonic ally, was back in the abyss where he belonged, and Cadrith was back in his tower with the last of his tools now safely locked up in the study. And things would be even better with Cadrissa instead of that fool Valen. After watching the other mage come unhinged when he failed to master that corrupted Drenoric device, he could see how much better it... He stopped. He thought he saw some movement on the stairs below, some dark shape slinking about the shadows. At once his mind returned to the abyss and the hidden enemies and trouble lurking on the peripheries. But just as quickly he brought himself back into line. He was in his tower, and it was secure. None could get in but him, and nothing else was here. That was, unless... He spun back on his heel. No, there was no one here, and there had been no one here since he'd left. Even if she'd found a way, she'd be long since dead by now. This wasn't the time for sentiment, only for continuing in his resolve. He focused on an old door at the end of a dark hallway, deep in the tower's heart. As thick as the stone wall surrounding it, the door had grown gray over the years, but still held firm. The magical energy coursing through it held it as fast and true as the day it was first set in place. He waved his skeletal hand, and it silently swung open. As soon as he set foot inside, light burned away the darkness. Seeing the room brought everything back in rapid succession. It was here he'd spent his last days as a living man. It was also the last piece of Tralodren he'd seen before leaving for the abyss. And now he'd come full circle, just like he always knew he would. He took in the old room in silence. After all this time, everything remained just as he'd left it. Books lined the wall to his right in giant shelves, reaching all the way to the ceiling a few feet above his head. The ancient covers resembled a cobblestone walkway rising to the top shelf. While these books seemed to have maintained their shape, Cadrith knew they'd crumble to dust with just the slightest breath. But he wasn't concerned with these anymore. They'd served their purpose, and he'd learned from them all he could. His attention instead went to his left and an old wooden table. On top of it lay a humanoid form covered by a dusty white cloth. He didn't need to remove it to discern the body was still whole. Shifting his attention to the wall opposite the door.